May it please the tribunal. An hour later, following the conversation between Goering and Seyss-Inquart, with which I dealt this morning, the defendant Goering telephoned to Dombrowski at the German embassy in Vienna. I have reference to the telephone conversation marked PP on page 2, part C of document 2949 PS. In that conversation, in the first place, the defendant Goering showed concern that the Nazi Party and all of its formations should be definitely legalized promptly. I quote, as I say, from page 2 of the transcript. Goering, now to go on. The party has definitely been legalized. Dombrowski, but that is, it isn't necessary to even discuss that. Goering, with all of its...
The marshal of the court, see that the window is closed behind the tribunal here. Yes, Mr. Alderman.
Goering, with all of its organizations. Dombrowski, with all of its organizations within this country. Goering, in uniform. Dombrowski, in uniform. Goering, good. Dombrowski calls attention to the fact that the SA and SS have already been on duty for 1/2 hour, which means everything is all right. In addition, Goering stated that the cabinet, the Austrian cabinet, must be formed by 7:30 p.m. And he transmitted instructions to be delivered to Seyss-Inquart as to who should be appointed to the cabinet. I quote from page 3 of the English text of the transcript of the conversation. Goering, yes, and by 7:30, he also must talk with the Fuhrer. And as to the cabinet, Kepler will bring you the names. One thing I have forgotten, Fischbeck must have the Department of Economy and Commerce. Dombrowski, that's understood. Goering, Kaltenbrunner is to have the Department of Security, and Barr is to have the armed forces. The Austrian army is to be taken by Seyss-Inquart himself. And you know all about the Justice Department. Dombrowski, yes, yes. Goering, give me the name. Dombrowski, well, your brother-in-law, isn't that right? That's Hubert, Hubert, the brother-in-law of defendant Goering. Goering, yes. Dombrowski, yes. Goering, that's right. And then also Fishbeck. About 20 minutes later, at 5:26 p.m., Goering was faced with the news that Miklas, the president, was refusing to appoint Seyss-Inquart as chancellor. And he issued instructions as to the ultimatum that was to be delivered to Miklas. I quote from the telephone conversation between Goering and Seyss-Inquart in Part E of the folder, the part marked capital R to capital R, pages 1 and 2 of Part E. I'm sorry, I thought the interpreters had the letter marks. They do not, I understand. Goering, now remember the following. You go immediately, together with Lieutenant General Muff, and tell the federal president that if the conditions which are known to you are not accepted immediately, the troops who are already stationed at and advancing to the frontier will march in tonight along the whole line, and Austria will cease to exist. Lieutenant General Muff should go with you and demand to be admitted for conference immediately. Please do inform us immediately about Miklas's position. Tell him there is no time now for any joke. Just through the false report we received before action was delayed, but now the situation is that tonight the invasion will begin from all the corners of Austria. The invasion will be stopped, and the troops will be held at the border only if we are informed by 7:30 that Miklas has entrusted you with the federal chancellorship. There follows in the transcript a sentence which is broken up. M, I suppose that means Lieutenant General Muff, does not matter, whatever it might be, the immediate restoration of the party with all its organizations. There's again an interruption in the transcript. And then call out all the National Socialists all over the country. They should now be in the streets. So remember, report must be given till 7:30. Lieutenant General Muff is supposed to come along with you. I shall inform him immediately. If Miklas could not understand it in 4 hours, we shall make him understand it now in 4 minutes. An hour later, at 6:28 p.m., Goering had an extensively interrupted telephone conversation with Kepler and Muff and Seyss-Inquart. When he told Kepler that Miklas had refused to appoint Seyss-Inquart, Goering said, I read from Part H, it's about a third of the way down on the page. Goering, well then, Seyss-Inquart has to dismiss him. Just go upstairs again and just tell him plainly that Seyss-Inquart, S.I., shall call on the National Socialist Guard, and in 5 minutes the troops will march in by my order. After an interruption, Seyss-Inquart came to the telephone and informed the defendant Goering that Miklas was still sticking to his old viewpoint, although a new person had gone in to talk to him, and there might be definite word in about 10 minutes. The conversation proceeded as follows. I quote from page 2 of Part H, beginning about the middle of the page. Goering, listen, so I shall wait a few more minutes till he comes back. Then you inform me via blitz conversation in the Reichschancellery. As usually, but it has to be done fast. I hardly can justify it as a matter of fact. I'm not entitled to do so. If it cannot be done, then you have to take over the power. All right? Seyss-Inquart. But if he threatens? Goering, yes. Seyss-Inquart. Well, I see. Then we shall be ready. Goering, call me via blitz. In other words, Goering and Seyss-Inquart had agreed on a plan for Seyss-Inquart to take over power if Miklas remained obdurate. The plan, which was already discussed, involved the use of both the National Socialist forces in Austria and the German troops who would be crossing the border. Later that night, Goering and Seyss-Inquart had another conversation at about 11 o'clock. This was after the ultimatum had expired. Seyss-Inquart informed Goering that Miklas was still refusing to name Seyss-Inquart as Chancellor. The conversation then proceeded as follows, and I quote from Part I, capital I, of this folder. Goering, okay. What is the German word for okay? Schön? Beautiful. I shall give the order to march in, and then you make sure that you get the power. Notify the leading people about the following, which I shall tell you now. Everyone who offers resistance or organizes resistance will immediately be subjected to our court-martial, the court-martial of our invading troops. Is that clear? Seyss-Inquart, yes. Goering, including leading personalities. It doesn't make any difference. Seyss-Inquart, yes, they have given the order not to offer any resistance. Goering, yes, it does not matter. The federal president did not authorize you, and that also can be considered as resistance. Seyss Inquart, yes. Goering, well, now you're officially authorized. Seyss Inquart, yes. Goering, well, good luck, Heil Hitler. Did I say 11? I'm advised that I said that conversation took place at 11 o'clock. It was 8 o'clock. I meant to say 8 o'clock. It's quite interesting to me, as a precedent, that when the defendant Goering was planning to invade a peaceful neighboring state, he planned to indict what he referred to as major war criminals before German court-martial. Leading personalities. So much for the conversations with respect to the plan of action for taking over power. Nothing else very significant was said on that subject over the telephone, at least as far as these transcripts indicate. But there was another historical event which was discussed over the telephone. I refer to the famous telegram which Seyss Inquart sent to the German government requesting the German government to send troops into Austria to help Seyss Inquart put down disorder. A conversation held at 8:48 that night between Goering and Kepler proceeded as follows. I read from page 1 of part L. Goering, well, I do not know yet. Listen, the main thing is that Inquart takes over all powers of the government, that he keeps the radio stations occupied. Kepler, well, we represent the government now. Goering, yes, that's it. You're the government. Listen carefully. The following telegram should be sent here by Seyss Inquart. Take the notes. Quote, the provisional Austrian government, which after the dismissal of the Schuschnigg government considered it its task to establish peace and order in Austria, sends to the German government the urgent request to support it in its task and to help it to prevent bloodshed. For this purpose, it asks the German government to send German troops as soon as possible. Kepler, well, SA and SS are marching through the streets, but everything is quiet.
Did you say quiet?
Quiet.
In my copy, it's quick.
That's a typographical error. It's quiet.
Yes.
Everything has collapsed with the professional groups. Now, all this talk about sending German troops in to put down disorder. The SA and the SS were marching in the streets, but everything was quiet. And a few minutes later, the conversation continued thus. Reading from page 2 of part L. Goering, then our troops will cross the border today. Kepler, yes. Goering. Well, and he should send the telegram as soon as possible. Kepler will send the telegram to Seyss-Inquart in the office of the Federal Chancellor. Goering, please show him the text of the telegram and do tell him that we're asking him, well, he doesn't even need to send the telegram. All he needs to do is to say agreed. Kepler, yes. Goering, either call me at the Fuhrer's or at my place. Well, good luck. Heil Hitler. Well, of course, it didn't need to send in the telegram because Goering wrote the telegram. And he already had it. It will be recalled that in the first conversation, Part A, held at 3:05 p.m., Goering had requested Seyss-Inquart to send the telegram agreed upon, but now the matter was so urgent that Goering dictated the exact wording of the telegram over the telephone. And an hour later, at 9:54 p.m., a conversation between Dr. Dietrich in Berlin and Kepler in Vienna went on as follows. Reading from Part M. Dietrich, I need the telegram urgently. Kepler, tell the General Field Marshal that Seyss-Inquart agrees. Dietrich, this is marvelous. Thank you. Kepler, listen to the radio. News will be given. Dietrich, where? Kepler, from Vienna. Dietrich, so Seyss-Inquart agrees? Kepler, jawohl. Next, the actual order to invade Austria. Communications with Austria were now suspended, but the German military machine had been set in motion. To demonstrate that, I now offer in evidence captured document C-182, offered as Exhibit USA 77, a directive of 11 March 1938 at 20:45 hours from Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. This directive, initialed by General Jodl and signed by Hitler, orders the invasion of Austria in view of its failure to comply with the German ultimatum. It's C-182. The directive reads, top secret, Berlin, 11 March 1938, 20:45 hours. Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, OKW with other symbols, 35 copies, 6 copy. CNC Navy, a pencil note, has been informed. Operation Otto. Directive number 2. 1, the demands of the German ultimatum to the Austrian government have not been fulfilled. 2, the Austrian armed forces have been ordered to withdraw in front of the entry of German troops and to avoid fighting. The Austrian government has ceased to function of its own accord. 3, to avoid further bloodshed in Austrian towns, the entry of the German armed forces into Austria will commence according to Directive Number 1 at daybreak on 12/3. I expect these set objectives to be reached by exerting all forces to the full as quickly as possible. Signed, Adolf Hitler, initialed by Jodl, and by a name that looks like Varlamont. And then some interesting communications with Rome to avoid possibility of disaster from that source. At the very time that Hitler and Goering had embarked on this military undertaking, they still had a question mark in their mind, and that was Italy. Italy had massed on the Italian border in 1934 on the occasion of July 25, 1934, the putsch. Italy had traditionally been the political protector of Austria. With what a sigh of relief did Hitler hear at 10:25 p.m. that night from Prince Philip of Hessen, his ambassador at Rome, that he had just come back from the Palazzo Venezia and Mussolini had accepted the whole thing in a very friendly manner. The situation can really be grasped by the rereading of the conversation. The record of the conversation shows the excitement under which Hitler was operating when he spoke over the phone. It is a short conversation, and I shall read the first half of it from Part N of the transcripts of 2949 PS, Part N. I'm afraid your title, Part N, may be blurred on the mimeograph. H is Hessen, and F is the Führer. Hessen. I have just come back from Palazzo Venezia. Il Duce accepted the whole thing in a very friendly manner. He sends you his regards.
I've got them, the parts lettered, not numbered. Part W, I've got.
It's Part N. The mimeograph on my copy is blurred.
I beg your pardon, yes.
He sends you his regards. He had been informed from Austria. Schuschnigg gave him the news. He had then said it would be a complete impossibility. It would be a bluff. Such a thing could not be done. So he was told that it was unfortunately arranged thus, and it could not be changed anymore. Then Mussolini said that Austria would be immaterial to him. Führer, then please tell Mussolini I will never forget him for this. Hessen, yes. Hitler, never, 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 whatever happens, I'm still ready to make a quite different agreement with him. Hessen, yes, I told him that too. Hitler, as soon as the Austrian affair has been settled, I shall be ready to go with him through thick and thin. Nothing matters. Hessen, yes, my Führer. Hitler, listen. I shall make any agreement. I am no longer in fear of the terrible position which would have existed militarily in case we had gotten into a conflict. You may tell him that I do thank him ever so much. Never, never shall I forget that. Hessen, yes, my Führer. Hitler, I will never forget it, whatever will happen. If he should ever need any help or be in any danger, he can be convinced that I shall stick to him whatever might happen, even if the whole world were against him. Hessen, yes, my Führer. The tribunal will recall the reference in General Jodel's diary to the letter which Hitler had sent to Mussolini. It is dated March 11. It may be found in the official publication Documenta der Deutschen Politik, Volume 6, 1, page 135, number 24A. I asked the court to take judicial notice of it, and you will find a translation of it appearing in our document 2510 PS. In this letter, after stating that Austria had been declining into anarchy, Hitler wrote, and I quote, "I have decided to reestablish order in my fatherland, order and tranquility, and to give to the popular will the possibility of settling its own fate in unmistakable fashion, openly and by its own decision." End the quote. He stated that this was only an act of self-defense, that he had no hostile intentions towards Italy. And after the invasion, when Hitler was at Linz, Austria, he communicated his gratitude to Mussolini once more in the famous telegram which the world so well remembers. I again cite Documenta der Deutschen Politik, Volume 6, page 145, number 29. The translation of the telegram being in our document 2467 PS. And the telegram read, "Mussolini, I will never forget you for this." We now shift our scene from Vienna to Berlin. We have shifted our scene, from Vienna to Berlin. It may now be appropriate to come back to Vienna. Just long enough to recall that late in the evening of March 11, President Miklas did appoint Defendant Seyss-Inquart as Chancellor. The radio announcement of Seyss-Inquart's appointment was made at 11:15 p.m. This is noted in Documenta der Deutschen Politik, Volume 6, 1, page 137, number 25A, and a translation of the announcement is in our document 2465 PS. Then something had to be done in London to smooth things over there. And accordingly, one more act played on the international scene is set down in the Air Ministry telephone transcript. On Sunday, March 13, 1938, the day after the invasion, Defendant Goering, who had been left in Berlin in charge of the Reich by Hitler, who had gone to his fatherland, phoned Defendant Ribbentrop in London. I find this conversation very illuminating as to the way in which these defendants operated, using, if I may employ American vernacular, a kind of international double talk to soothe and mislead other nations. I quote from Part 1 of Item W of Document 2949 PS. Goering, as you know, speaking to Ribbentrop in London, as you know, the Fuhrer has entrusted me with the administration of the current government procedures, Führung der Regierungsgeschäfte, and therefore I want to inform you there is overwhelming joy in Austria. That you can hear over the radio. Ribbentrop, yes, it is fantastic, isn't it? Goering, yes, the last march into the Rhineland is completely overshadowed. The Fuhrer was deeply moved when he talked to me last night. You must remember, it was the first time that he saw his homeland again. Now, I mainly want to talk about political things. Well, this story, we had given an ultimatum. That is just foolish gossip. From the very beginning, the National Socialist ministers and the representatives of the people, that's Volksreferenten, have presented the ultimatum. Later on, more and more prominent people of the movement party participated, and as a natural result, the Austrian National Socialist ministers asked us to back them up so they would not be completely beaten up again and be subjected to terror and civil war. Then we told them we would not allow Schuschnigg to provoke a civil war under no circumstances. Whether by Schuschnigg's direct order or with consent, the communists and Reds had been armed and were already making demonstrations, which were photographed with Heil Moscow and so on. Naturally, all these facts caused some danger for Wiener Neustadt. Then you have to consider that Schuschnigg made his speeches telling them the Fatherlandish Front would fight to its last man, one could not know that they would capitulate like that. And therefore, Seyss-Inquart, who already had taken over the government, asked us to march in immediately. Before we had already marched up to the frontier, since we could not know whether there would be a civil war or not. These are the actual facts which can be proved by documents. Now there, the defendant Goering was giving to the defendant Ribbentrop the proper line that he should take in London as to how to explain what had happened in Austria. Of course, when the defendant Goering said that his story about this matter could be proved by documents, I don't think he had in mind that his own telephone calls might constitute documents. Another rather interesting item begins on page 3 of the English text of this part W. Still Goering talking to Ribbentrop in London. Goering, this is at the bottom of the page. Goering, no, I think so too. Only I did not know if you spoke already to those people. I want that you once more, but no, not at all once more, but correctly speaking, generally speaking, tell the following to Halifax and Chamberlain. It is not correct that Germany has given any ultimatum. This is a lie by Schuschnigg, because the ultimatum was presented to him by Seyss-Inquart, Glaise Hossenauer, and Uri. Furthermore, it is not true that we have presented an ultimatum to the federal president, but it also was given by the others. And as far as I know, just a military attaché came along, asked by Seyss-Inquart because of a technical question. You will recall that he was a lieutenant general, directed by Goering to go along. He was supposed to ask whether, in case Seyss-Inquart would ask for the support of German troops, Germany would grant this request. Furthermore, I want to state that Seyss-Inquart asked us expressly by phone, as by telegram, to send troops because he did not know about the situation in Wiener Neustadt, Vienna, and so on, because arms had been distributed there. And then he could not know how the Fatherlandish Front might react, since they always had such a big mouth. Ribbentrop, Mr. Goering, tell me, how is the situation in Vienna? Is everything settled yet? Goering, yes. Yesterday I landed hundreds of airplanes with some companies in order to secure the airfield, and they were received with joy. Today, the advance unit of the 17th Division marches in, together with the Austrian troops. Also, I want to point out that the Austrian troops did not withdraw, but that they got together and fraternized immediately with the German troops wherever they were stationed. These are quite interesting explanations. That the ultimatum was by Seyss-Inquart alone and not by Goering. That Lieutenant General Muff, the military attaché, was along just to answer a technical question. And that Seyss-Inquart asked expressly by telephone and by telegram for troops. But perhaps to understand this conversation, we must try to create again the actual physical scene of the time and place as Goering talked over the phone. I quote 8 lines from page 11 of the English text, about in the middle. Part W. Goering, well, do come. I shall be delighted to see you. Ribbentrop. I shall see you this afternoon. Goering, the weather is wonderful here. Blue sky. I'm sitting here on my balcony, all covered with blankets, in the fresh air, drinking my coffee. Later on, I have to drive in. I have to make a speech. And the birds are twittering, and here and there I can hear over the radio the enthusiasm which must be wonderful over there. That's Vienna. Ribbentrop, that is marvelous. May it please the tribunal, I have practically come to the end of the materials relating to the aggression against Austria. In a moment, I shall take up quite briefly the fact of the Anschluss, some of the developments which took place after the German troops marched across the border. What is to come as to that is epilogue. But before developing the epilogue, it may be appropriate to pause briefly for just a moment. I think that the facts which I have related to the tribunal today show plainly certain things about the defendants involved in the conspiracy. And among the conspirators who particularly took action in the Austrian matter were von Papen, Seyss-Inquart, Ribbentrop, von Neurath, and Goering. First, I think it is plain that these men were dangerous men. They used their power without a bridle. They used their power to override the independence and freedom of others. And they were more than bullies squeezing a smaller foe. They were very sly bullies. They compounded their force with fraud. They coupled threats with legal technicalities and devious maneuvers. Wearing a sanctimonious mask to cover their duplicities. I think they are dangerous men. In accordance with the directive of March 11, our document C-182, U.S. Exhibit 77, the German army crossed the Austrian border at daybreak, 12 March 1938. Hitler issued a proclamation to the German people announcing the invasion and purporting to justify it. I referred again to Dokumente der Deutschen Politik, Volume 6, page 140, number 27, the proclamation of Hitler. The British government and the French government filed protests. The German government and the Austrian National Socialists swiftly secured their grip on Austria. Seyss-Inquart welcomed Hitler at Linz, and they both expressed their joys over the events of the day. Seyss-Inquart, in his speech, declared Article 88 of the Treaty of Saint-Germain inoperative. I referred to the speech of Seyss-Inquart at Linz on 12 March 1938 as contained in the Dokumente der Deutschen Politik, 6, Volume 6, 1, page 144, number 28A, of which I asked the tribunal to take judicial notice, and which you will find translated in our document 2485 PS. For a view of what was happening in Vienna, I offer in evidence our Exhibit L-292, Telegram 70, American Legation, Vienna, to the American Secretary of State, 12 March 1938. That is L-292, and I offer it as Exhibit USA 78. And quoted in full. Secretary of State, Washington, 70, March 12, noon. Numerous German bombers flying over Vienna, dropping leaflets, quote, National Socialist Germany greets its possession, National Socialist Austria, and its new government in true indivisible union, end the quote. Continual rumors, small German troop movements into Austria, and impending arrival Austrian Legion. SS and SA in undisputed control in Vienna. Police wear swastika armbands. Schuschnigg and Schmidt rumored arrested. Himmler and Hess here. Signed, Wiley. The lawmaking machine was put to work immediately on the task of consolidation. For all of this material, I shall merely refer the tribunal to the German sources and to the document number of the English translation, but I think I need not offer these legislative acts in evidence, but shall merely invite the court to take judicial notice of them. First, Miklas was caused to resign as president. I refer to Dokumente der Deutschen Politik, Volume 6, 1, page 147, number 30B. In this connection, the court, the translation is in our document 2466 PS. In this connection, the court will no doubt recall Goering's telephone conversation as shown in document 2949 PS, that in view of Miklas's delay in appointing Seyss-Inquart, Miklas would be dismissed. Seyss-Inquart became both Chancellor and President. He then signed a federal constitutional law of March 13, 1938, for the reunion of Austria with the German Reich, which in turn was incorporated into the Reich Statute of Reunion, passed the same day, the German law. I cite for that the Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, volume, is that I or 1? Volume 1, page 237, number 21. A translation of which will be found in our document 2307 PS. This federal constitutional law declared Austria to be a province of the German Reich. By annexing Austria into the German Reich, Germany violated Article 80 of the Treaty of Versailles, which provided by the way, on the constitutional law to which I just referred, there appear as signatories the following names: Adolf Hitler, Führer and Reichschancellor; Goering, General Field Marshal, Reich Minister of Aviation; Frick, Reich Minister of the Interior; von Ribbentrop, Reich Minister of Foreign Affairs; R. Hess, Deputy Führer. By annexing Austria into the German Reich, Germany violated Article 80 of the Treaty of Versailles, which provides, I quote, "Germany acknowledges and will respect the independence of Austria within the frontier which may be fixed in a treaty between that state and the principal allied and associated powers. She agrees that this independence shall be inalienable." Similarly, the Austrian action violated Article 88 of the Treaty of Saint-Germain, which provides, "The independence of Austria is inalienable otherwise than with the consent of the Council of the League of Nations." Consequently, Austria undertakes, in the absence of the consent of the said Council, to abstain from any act which might directly or indirectly, or by any means whatever, compromise her independence, particularly, and until her admission to membership of the League of Nations, by participation in the affairs of another power. This basic constitutional law provided for a plebiscite to be held on 10 April 1938 on the question of reunion. But this was a mere formality. The plebiscite could only confirm the union declared in the law. It could not undo Germany's union with and control over Austria. To illustrate the way in which legal consolidation was swiftly assured, under conditions of occupation of Austria by troops, it is not necessary to do more than review some of the statutes passed within the month. Hitler placed the Austrian Federal Army under his own command and required all members of the army to take an oath of allegiance to Hitler as their supreme commander. A translation of the pertinent document will be found in our 2936 PS, and I refer to the instruction of the Führer and Reich Chancellor concerning the Austrian Federal Army, March 13, 1938, documented at Deutschen Politik, Volume 6, 1, page 150. Public officials of the province of Austria were required to take an oath of office, swearing allegiance to Hitler, Führer of the German Reich and people. Jewish officials, as defined, were not permitted to take the oath. I refer to decree of the Führer and Reich Chancellor concerning the administration of oath to the officials of the province of Austria, March 15, 1938, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, Volume 1, page 245, number 24, the translation being in our document 2311 PS. Hitler and Frick signed a decree applying to Austria various Reich laws, including the law of 1933 against the formation of new political parties, and the 1933 law for the preservation of unity of party and state. I refer to first decree of the Führer and Reich Chancellor concerning the introduction of German Reich law into Austria, 15 March 1938, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, Volume 1, page 247, number 25, a translation being in our document 2310 PS. Hitler, Frick, and Goering ordered that the Reich Minister of the Interior be the central authority for carrying out the reunion of Austria with the German Reich. I cite order pursuant to the law concerning the reunion of Austria with the German Reich, March 16, 1932, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, that must be 38, Volume 1, page 249, number 25. Translated in our 1060 PS. In connection with Germany's extensive propaganda campaign to ensure acceptability of the German regime, it may be noted that Goebbels established a Reich propaganda office in Vienna. I cite order concerning the establishment of a Reich propaganda office in Vienna, March 31, 1938, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, Volume 1, page 350, number 46. Translated in our document 2935 PS. The ballot addressed to soldiers of the former Austrian army as, quote, German soldier, end the quote, asked the voters whether they agreed with the accomplishment and ratification on March 13, 1938, of the reuniting of Austria with Germany. I cite second order concerning plebiscite and election for the Greater German Reichstag of 24 March 1938, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, Volume 1, page 303, translated in our document 1659 PS. The groundwork was fully laid before the holding of the plebiscite, quote, for German men and women of Austria, end the quote, promised in the basic law of March 13. And then the importance of Austria in further aggression. Could we run that screen up? Or is the chart still behind it? All right. The court will remember the chart. The seizure of Austria had now formed that lower jaw to the head of the wolf around the head of Czechoslovakia. Germany's desire to consummate the Anschluss with Austria, and it's determined to execute that aim in the way and at the time that it did, that is, with threat of military force, quickly, and despite political risk, was due to the importance of Austria in its further plans of aggression. The conference held November 5, 1937, planning for aggressive war in Europe, outlined as objectives in Austria the conquest of food through expulsion of 1 million people and the effective increase in fighting strength, in part through the improvement in the frontier. And I cite again document 386 PS, U.S. Exhibit 25. Austria was to yield to Germany material resources. And moreover, she provided ready cash taken from the Jews and from the Austrian government. One of the first orders passed after the Anschluss was an order signed by Hitler, Frick, Schwerin von Krosigk, and Schacht for the transfer to the Reich of the assets of the Austrian National Bank. I refer to the order for the transfer of the Austrian National Bank to the Reichsbank, March 17, 1938, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, Volume 1, page 254, number 27. Translated in our 2313 PS. Austria also yielded human resources. 3 months after the Anschluss, there was enacted a decree requiring the 21-year-old men, Austrian men, to report for active military service. I refer to the decree regarding registration for active military service in Austria during 1938, Reichsgesetzblatt, 1938, Volume 1, page 634, translated in our 1660 PS. And the acquisition of Austria improved the military strategic position of the German army. I invite the court's attention to a document which I introduced in the case on preparation for aggression, L-172, Exhibit USA 34, which was a lecture delivered by General Jodl, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, on 7 November at Munich to the Gauleiters. Only one page of that lecture appears in this particular document book. And I quote from one paragraph on page 5 of the English text, which is page 7 of Jodl's lecture, which reviewed the situation in 1938. The Austrian Anschluss, in its turn, brought with it not only the fulfillment of an old national aim, but also had the effect both of reinforcing our fighting strength and of materially improving our strategic position. Whereas up till then, the territory of Czechoslovakia had projected in a most menacing way right into Germany, a wasp waist in the direction of France, and an air base for the Allies, in particular Russia. Czechoslovakia herself was now enclosed by pincers. Its own strategic position had now become so unfavorable that she was bound to fall a victim to any attack pressed home with rigor before effective aid from the West could be expected to arrive. The Nazi conspirators were now ready to carry out the second part of this second phase of their aggressions and to take over Czechoslovakia. Logically, if the tribunal please, we should proceed at this point with the story about Czechoslovakia. For reasons that I explained earlier in the week, we've had to change our plan somewhat from a strictly logical order. And the plan at present is that on Monday, I shall go forward with the Czechoslovakian part of the aggressive war case. At this point, it is planned by our staff to show a motion picture, and it will take some few minutes to make physical arrangements in the courtroom so that if the court should feel like recessing, those arrangements could be made.
Could you tell me how long the showing of the picture will take?
My understanding, about an hour.
Well, we'll adjourn for 10 minutes then, shall we now? Or until the picture is ready?